She said she would wait until morning, a little girl standing barefoot in the cold darkness whispered. As the billionaire walked past, he almost left. But he didn't know that leaving meant she might never see the dawn, and that night, a choice turned the stranger she'd met by chance into the only person she couldn't stop waiting for. Grayson Vale had already unlocked his car, one hand on the door, one foot inside. The night cold enough to sting even through his tailored coat. Portland slept around him in low, distant hums, traffic far away, a siren fading somewhere it didn't matter. Then a small voice cut through the quiet. "I'll wait until morning." It wasn't loud. It wasn't desperate. It sounded decided. Grayson froze. The words reached him a second too late, settling in his chest before his mind could catch up. He turned slowly, almost unwillingly, and saw her standing beneath the yellow parking lot light. She was very small, painfully still. The light cast long shadows behind her, making her look even more alone. She couldn't have been more than 7. Blonde hair hung loose and tangled around her shoulders. A thin pink dress clung to her knees, useless against the winter air creeping between the buildings. She was barefoot. Her toes were red. Not from dirt, from cold. Yet she didn't shift her weight, didn't cry, didn't ask. She simply waited. Grayson straightened without realizing he'd been holding his breath. The meaning of her words landed all at once, sharp and undeniable. Morning was not guaranteed. People waited for buses, for stores to open, for the sun. Children did not wait through winter nights in parking lots, unless waiting was the only thing they had left. "What are you waiting for?" he asked. Keeping his voice neutral, controlled the same voice he used in boardrooms and negotiations. "For morning," she said again. She looked at him then. Not pleading, not hopeful, just watching. Grayson felt something tighten in his chest. He had left places like this his entire life without looking back. But the night suddenly felt too long, and the distance between now and morning felt dangerously wide. Up close, she was even smaller. Grayson took a step toward her, then stopped himself, careful not to tower. The cold air curled around them, biting harder now that he noticed it. His eyes dropped again to her feet, bare against frozen concrete. "You'll get sick standing out here," he said. She shrugged lightly, as if the idea belonged to someone else. "It's safer when it's light," she replied. The way she said it made his stomach sink. Safer meant she had learned when it wasn't. "Where are your parents?" he asked. She hesitated, not long, just enough to choose honesty carefully. "I'm looking for my home," she said. Then after a pause, "or my dad." Her voice didn't break. That somehow made it worse. "And your mom, she's gone. Not passed, not left, just gone." Grayson glanced around the parking lot, half expecting an adult to appear, annoyed, apologetic, ready to take responsibility. No one came. The city offered no answers. Just concrete. Locked doors. Yellow light. "It's late," he said. "You shouldn't be here alone." "I know," she replied calmly. "That's why I'll wait." The word wait landed differently now. Waiting wasn't a plan. It was surrender disguised as patience. The temperature would drop. The lot would empty. The night would stretch until even hope got tired. Grayson crouched slightly, lowering himself to her eye level. "What's your name?" She studied his face as if measuring risk. "Lila," she said. "Lila," he repeated softly. For the first time, she shifted her weight, just barely, her hands pressing against the sides of her dress, trying to hide the way they trembled. Grayson felt the quiet certainty of a moment that could not be undone. He could still walk away, but he already knew he wouldn't. Grayson Vale was a man people stepped aside for. 38 years old, founder, investor. The kind of man whose calendar decided his life for him. He moved forward, not sideways. Left places cleanly, efficiently. He had never believed in looking back. Yet here he was, crouched in a freezing parking lot, staring at a barefoot child who had learned how to disappear without moving. "Do you know where your home is?" he asked. Lila nodded. She recited the address smoothly without hesitation, like a poem memorized long ago. A small town hours away, Cedar Hollow. Her voice stayed level, distant, as if the words belonged to someone else. When she finished, she looked up at him again. "My dad said he'd come back," she added quietly. Grayson didn't interrupt, but he didn't. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything she'd said before. Grayson straightened slowly and closed the car door he'd never finished opening. The sound echoed louder than it should have. He could call the police, social services, hand the situation over to a system built for exactly this. But systems worked on schedules. Lila had already learned that nights didn't. "Lila," he said, his voice lower now, "you don't have to wait here." She searched his face, cautious, practiced. "Then what should I do?" she asked. Grayson turned, opened the car door fully this time, and stepped back. "Come with me," he said, "at least until morning." For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not relief, not joy. Just a fragile flicker of possibility, thin as the light behind her. She took one small step forward, and in that moment, Grayson Vale crossed a line he would never be able to uncross. The moment Lila slid into the passenger seat, she tucked herself tight against the door, as if space itself could accuse her of taking too much. Her knees pulled up slightly, hands folded in her lap. Quiet, so quiet it felt practiced. Grayson closed the door gently, then paused with his palms still against the cold glass. For a second, he didn't start the engine. He just looked at her profile in the dim light. The thin pink dress wrinkled at the hem, the faint shiver in her shoulders she tried to hide. A child shouldn't know how to be invisible. He started the car. The heater came on with a low sigh. Warm air pushed forward like a promise. Grayson reached across the console, turning the dial higher, angling the vents toward her bare legs. Lila noticed the change. She didn't say thank you, not because she wasn't grateful, because gratitude was a risk. Gratitude was a way of admitting you needed something, and needing things had probably gotten her punished before, if not by hands, then by disappointment. Grayson kept his eyes on the windshield. The parking lot slipped behind them, yellow lights shrinking in the rearview mirror until they became tiny, harmless dots. "Are you cold?" he asked. She answered after a beat, as if calculating the safest response. "A little," she said. "A little." Her toes had been red. Her skin had been stiff. Her voice had been too calm for a body that was clearly fighting the night. Grayson tightened his grip on the wheel. He knew the city. He knew roads and traffic patterns. He knew money and pressure and schedules. He did not know what to do with a child who looked like she had already made peace with dying quietly. They reached a red light. The glow caught her face and turned her eyes into something brighter, almost unreal. "What happened tonight?" he asked softly. "How did you end up there?" Lila's gaze stayed on the passing streetlights. Her reflection appeared and disappeared in the window, like a ghost she wasn't sure belonged to her. "I was walking," she said. "Then it got dark. That's it." She shrugged, barely lifting one shoulder. "It always gets dark." The way she said it, simple, factual, hit him harder than any dramatic confession could have. Darkness wasn't an event to her. It was a routine. Grayson swallowed. "Do you have anyone you can call?" She shook her head once. Small. Final. Silence filled the car again, but it wasn't comfortable. It was tense, like the quiet before something breaks. At the next light, Grayson glanced down and saw her fingers pressed so hard against her dress that her knuckles looked pale. "You don't have to be scared," he said. Lila didn't look at him. "I'm not scared," she whispered, but her body was, and Grayson could feel it like a tremor in the air between them. He drove forward, realizing something sharp and unsettling. Warmth could feel like a trap when you'd learned that safety never lasted. 10 minutes later, he pulled into a small diner that sat alone near the highway. Bright windows, faded sign, the kind of place that looked almost imaginary against the dark. Inside, the air smelled like coffee fryer oil and warm bread. Lila stepped out slowly. The cold hit her again, and she flinched so quickly she didn't even seem aware of it. Grayson moved without thinking, shrugging off his coat and draping it around her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her sleeves, hanging past her hands. She froze. Her eyes lifted to him wide and cautious, as if kindness was something that could snap. "You can keep it on," he said gently. "Just for now." Lila nodded once, small as a mouse. Then she walked beside him, careful, quiet, as if the floor might crack if she stepped too hard. A waitress glanced up, her expression softening immediately. Grayson chose a booth in the corner. Lila slid in on the inside, automatically placing herself where she'd be hardest to see. Grayson ordered without asking too many questions. Something hot, something filling, something that didn't require her to explain herself. Soup, eggs, toast, a glass of milk. When the food arrived, Lila stared at the plate as if it might disappear if she touched it too fast. Grayson watched her hands hover. She picked up the spoon with both hands for a second, then corrected herself, switching to one hand the way she thought she was supposed to. Everything about her was control, tiny rules built to prevent trouble. "You can eat," he said quietly. She blinked. "I am." But she wasn't, not really. Not yet. She took a small bite, chewed carefully, set the spoon down. Looked at him again, reading his face for warning. Grayson felt something twist in his chest. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Lila thought about it like it was a trick question, her brow furrowed, serious beyond her years. "A little," she said finally. "But it's okay." There it was again. Permission to be ignored. "It's not okay." Grayson replied, his voice calm but firm. "You're allowed to be hungry." Lila's lips parted slightly, as if she'd never heard that sentence before. "You don't have to rush," he added, "and you don't have to stop." That did it. Lila lowered her eyes to the plate and began to eat, still slowly, still politely, but now with a quiet determination, as if she was completing a task she'd been afraid to start. Halfway through, she paused, then took a bigger bite. Her shoulders loosened by a fraction. When she finished, she folded her napkin neatly and placed it beside the plate. "Thank you," she said, voice formal. Practiced. Adult. Grayson hated how a 7-year-old could sound like she'd been trained to survive strangers. He paid quickly. And when they stepped back into the night, Lila tightened his coat around her, as if warmth was something she had to hold onto with both hands. Back in the car, the heater filled the silence with a soft hum. Portland's lights stretched into long lines as they merged onto the highway. The city faded behind them like a movie ending too soon. Lila sat with her hands folded again, posture too perfect for a child. Grayson could feel her effort, like she was holding her body still so the world wouldn't notice she was there. A few miles passed. Then Lila spoke so quietly he almost missed it. "My dad used to drive at night, too." Grayson didn't look at her right away. He kept his eyes on the road, letting the words settle. "He said the road was easier when fewer people were on it," she continued. "Did you like that?" he asked. Lila hesitated, a small shrug. "I liked when he talked." Grayson's fingers tightened around the wheel, and when he didn't, Lila's voice dropped, the calm cracking just enough to show what lived underneath. When he didn't, it meant he was thinking about leaving. The sentence hung in the car like frost. Grayson swallowed. "Did he tell you he was leaving?" "No," Lila said. "He just, stopped coming back." The way she said it was brutal in its simplicity. Not dramatic, not angry, just a fact she'd learned the hard way over and over until it felt normal. Lila's eyelids began to droop. Exhaustion pulled at her slow and heavy. Her head tilted toward the window cheek, pressing against the cold glass. She blinked, fighting sleep like it was dangerous. Grayson reached into the back seat at the next pull-off, grabbed a small travel blanket he kept for long drives, and draped it over her. Lila stirred. Her eyes opened, halfway startled, suspicious. "It's okay," Grayson murmured. "Just sleep." For a moment, she didn't move. Then her fingers curled around the blanket with an instinctive grip, as if warmth could vanish if she didn't hold it down. A few minutes later, her breathing evened out. Lila fell asleep in the passenger seat, still clutching the fabric, still bracing for loss, even in rest. Grayson drove on, staring at the dark road ahead. He had thought this was temporary. A ride, a night, a good deed that ended cleanly in the morning. But the truth sat beside him now, small, quiet, and unmanageable. And somewhere between the diner's warm light and the endless highway, Grayson Vale realized he wasn't just driving a child to safety. He was driving away from the kind of man who could have walked away. Lila slept the way someone sleeps when they don't fully trust sleep. Her body remained slightly tense even as exhaustion dragged her under. One arm stayed wrapped around the blanket. Her fingers clenched the fabric with quiet determination, as if warmth were something that could slip away if she loosened her grip. Grayson noticed every detail. The soft fog of her breath against the window, the way her head kept slipping then correcting itself, the faint tremor that still ran through her legs even in rest. He drove slower than necessary. The highway stretched forward in long, empty lines. No traffic, no distractions. Just the road and the steady hum of the engine. It felt wrong to rush when a child beside him had spent so much of her life waiting. Grayson had always believed sleep was efficient, necessary, something you scheduled between meetings and flights. But watching Lila now, he understood that sleep could also be a negotiation. Her body wasn't resting. It was surrendering carefully. At a long curve in the road, her head finally tipped too far. It bumped softly against the glass. She stirred a small sound, leaving her throat half breath, half question. Grayson reacted instantly, easing the car onto the shoulder. He reached across, slowly, gently guiding her head back, placing a folded jacket between her cheek and the window. His movements were deliberate, almost reverent. Lila didn't wake. Her grip tightened around the blanket instead. Grayson sat there longer than necessary, hazard lights blinking softly behind them, watching the rise and fall of her chest. He wondered how many nights she'd fallen asleep like this, half alert, prepared to wake suddenly and run. How many times she'd been moved. How many times she'd been left. The thought settled heavy in his chest. He restarted the car and merged back onto the road. One hand steady on the wheel, the other resting on his knee, like he needed the reminder to stay present. For the first time in years, Grayson didn't think about the morning's meetings, or emails, or decisions waiting for him at sunrise. All he could think about was the child beside him and the quiet responsibility that had slipped into his life without asking. The night outside felt endless, but the sky ahead, barely visible through the dark, had begun to change. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, cautiously, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The sky faded from black to deep blue, then softened into pale gray. The world felt suspended roads, quieter trees standing still, everything waiting to exhale. Grayson noticed it before Lila did. He glanced at her still asleep cheeks, flushed now with warmth, lashes resting against skin that no longer looked so painfully pale. The blanket had slipped slightly, and he adjusted it again, careful not to wake her. They pulled off the highway just as the first weak light slipped over the horizon. A small roadside motel sat alone near the exit, flickering sign, cracked pavement windows dark, except for a single glowing light near the office. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't clean-lined or modern, but it was real, and it was warm. Grayson parked and turned off the engine. The sudden quiet felt loud. Lila stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. She blinked, disoriented, then looked around the unfamiliar car interior, the unfamiliar morning light. "Are we there?" she asked softly. "Not yet," Grayson said. "But we're close." She absorbed that quietly. Then her gaze drifted to the windshield where dawn spread thin and fragile across the sky. "It's morning," she said, not quite believing it. "Yes," Grayson replied. "You made it." The words landed harder than he expected. Lila nodded once, solemn as if completing something important. Not relieved, not excited. Finished. As if surviving the night had been a task she'd set for herself and now finally checked off. Inside the motel room, Lila moved carefully, eyes tracking every corner, every shadow. She sat on the edge of the bed, feet barely touching the floor, hands smoothing the blanket like she was testing whether it would disappear. "You can sleep," Grayson said gently. She lay down, fully clothed, shoes still missing, blanket pulled tight to her chin. Sleep took her instantly, this time deeper, heavier, the kind that only comes after fear loosens its grip. Grayson sat in the chair by the window and watched the morning grow brighter. In the soft daylight, Lila looked impossibly small. And for the first time, the question wasn't whether she'd survive the night. It was what surviving would cost her if she had to keep doing it alone. When Lila woke again, the room was filled with sunlight. It pooled across the carpet, crept up the walls, settled on the bed like something alive. For a brief moment, she lay very still, her body uncertain, waiting for the familiar drop in her stomach that came when she realized she was alone. It didn't come. She turned her head slowly. Grayson was still there, sitting in the same chair, jacket draped over the back, eyes on the window, but aware of her movement. "You're awake," he said softly. She pushed herself up on one elbow, blinking. "You didn't leave," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Grayson replied. "I said I wouldn't." Something in her shoulders loosened, just a fraction. But it was enough. They ate breakfast in the small motel dining area, toast, eggs, juice in plastic cups. Lila buttered her toast with intense concentration, holding the knife with both hands. She drank her juice carefully, pausing between sips like she was counting them. "Can we go to my house now?" she asked. Grayson hesitated only a moment. "Yes," he said. "We'll go." The drive to Cedar Hollow was quiet. Lila gave directions confidently, pointing when needed, correcting him when he took a turn too early. She knew the way too well for someone who hadn't been there in a long time. The town appeared suddenly, small and tired houses close together, paint-peeling yards overgrown. Grayson slowed as they turned down the street she indicated. "Here," Lila said. The car stopped in front of a small house at the edge of the block. The yard was unkempt, grass tall, windows dark. Lila didn't move at first. Then she opened the door and stepped out, standing very still as she stared at the front porch. The mailbox sagged under the weight of unopened letters, some bent, some faded. She walked up the steps and knocked once. Then again. She waited between each knock, counting silently. No answer. She tried the handle. "Locked. He used to leave it unlocked," she said softly. "So I could get in." Grayson crouched beside her as she sat down on the step and hugged her knees. "So I waited," Lila whispered. And in that moment, the morning felt heavier than the night ever had. They didn't go back to the car right away. Lila remained on the front step, knees pulled tight to her chest, eyes fixed on the door like it might suddenly remember her. The morning air was cool, but still carrying the faint sounds of a town beginning its day, distant engines, a dog barking, someone opening a shop down the street. None of it reached her. Grayson sat beside her close enough that she could feel his presence without being touched. He had learned quickly that rushing moments like this only made them break. After a while, he stood and walked slowly around the house. The closer he looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't neglect from a few hard weeks. The windows were filmed with dust, curtains drawn tight. The yard had grown wild in a way that only happens when no one plans to return. Leaves gathered in corners like they'd been left there on purpose. This house wasn't waiting. It had been abandoned. Grayson came back and sat again, elbows resting on his knees. "Lila," he said gently, "when was the last time you were here?" She thought for a long moment, eyes drifting to the cracked concrete. "Before my mom got sick," she said. "Dad said he had to go somewhere for work. He said it would be easier if I stayed with her." Grayson's chest tightened, and then Lila's voice stayed level, almost distant. "Then my mom died." The words landed with a quiet finality. "And your dad?" Grayson asked, though he already knew the answer. She shook her head. "He didn't come back." They sat in silence as the truth settled between them, heavy and unavoidable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a delay. It was a choice. Lila shifted, pressing her forehead briefly against her knees. "I thought if I waited long enough, he'd remember," she said. Grayson felt something hard and cold lock into place inside him. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said firmly. She didn't answer. Her shoulders trembled, once small, controlled, as if she were refusing to let the feeling grow bigger than she could manage. In that moment, Grayson understood something with painful clarity. Lila didn't need help finding her way home. She needed someone who wouldn't leave once she got there. The police station in Cedar Hollow was small and quiet, the kind of place where nothing urgent ever seemed to happen. The walls were beige, the floor scuffed from years of boots and boredom. Lila sat on a chair with her feet dangling above the ground, fingers twisted into the hem of her pink dress. Grayson stood beside her, explaining the situation to Officer Keller, whose expression grew more troubled with every sentence. "We've been looking for the father," the officer said finally. "For a while now." Lila looked up sharply. "Looking," she repeated. Officer Keller nodded. "He came in months ago, filed paperwork." Grayson felt the air shift. "What kind of paperwork?" he asked. The officer exhaled slowly. "He signed away custody." The words hit like a dropped plate. Lila stared at him. "Signed?" she asked again, quieter this time. "Yes," the officer said gently. "He gave up legal responsibility." Silence filled the room. Lila's hands tightened until her knuckles turned pale. She didn't cry. She didn't move. "So what happens to her now?" Grayson asked. The officer hesitated. "She'll be placed into temporary care, foster placement until something permanent is arranged." Temporary. The word echoed in Lila's chest like an old warning. She slid off the chair and stepped closer to Grayson, pressing her arm against his leg without speaking. Fear disguised as stillness. Grayson looked down at her, then back at the officer. "She won't be staying alone," he said quietly. "Not tonight. Not after this." The officer studied him. "Are you family?" Grayson didn't answer immediately. "No," he said finally. "But I won't leave her." Another pause. "We'll need background checks," the officer said. "Temporary guardianship forms. It won't be instant." "Do it," Grayson replied without hesitation. Lila looked up at him, searching his face. "Temporary?" she asked. Grayson met her eyes. "It just means we take this one step at a time." She nodded slowly, trusting the steadiness in his voice more than the word itself. As they left the station, Lila walked closer than before, and Grayson realized that for her closeness wasn't comfort. It was survival. The drive back felt longer, not because of the distance, but because everything had changed. Lila watched Cedar Hollow disappear through the rear window, her expression unreadable. She didn't wave, didn't cry. She simply let it go. In the car, she spoke softly. He really didn't want me. Grayson stopped at a red light and turned to her. No, he said carefully. He made a choice. And it was the wrong one. She considered that distinction, quietly storing it somewhere deep. Does that mean everyone leaves? She asked. No, Grayson answered without thinking. It means some people fail, and some people stay. They drove into the city as the sun lowered buildings rising around them like unfamiliar walls. Lila pressed her face close to the window, studying reflections that didn't quite look like her. Is this where you live? She asked. Yes, Grayson said. For now. For now, she repeated, tasting the words. His apartment was large and quiet, all glass and clean lines. It smelled like nothing. Looked like no one lived there long enough to leave evidence. Lila stopped just inside the doorway. I won't touch anything, she said quickly. I'll just sit. Grayson froze. He crouched in front of her. Lila, he said gently. You're allowed to be here. She nodded, unsure. That night she slept in the guest room, curled at the edge of the bed, with her small backpack placed neatly beside her, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Grayson checked on her more than once, standing in the doorway listening to her breathing. He had thought this was temporary, but as he turned off the lights, he understood something that unsettled him deeply. Temporary was a word adults used. Children like Lila lived inside it. The first morning in Grayson's apartment arrived quietly. No alarms, no rushing, just the muted hum of the city far below and a thin line of light slipping between the curtains. Lila woke before the sun. She always did. She slipped out of bed without making a sound, her feet careful against the cold floor, and padded down the hallway like she was afraid the walls might hear her. In the kitchen, she climbed onto a chair and sat perfectly still at the table, hands folded in front of her backpack, resting against her leg. Waiting. Grayson found her there 20 minutes later, coffee mug halfway to his lips. You don't have to wake up so early, he said gently. Lila, startled eyes widening as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. I didn't want to be late, she replied. Late for what? She hesitated, then shrugged. For being here. The words hit him harder than he expected. You're not on a schedule, Grayson said, pulling out a chair across from her. You don't need permission to exist in this house. She nodded, but the habit didn't disappear. Not that day. Not the next. Lila moved through the apartment like someone afraid to leave fingerprints behind. She lined her shoes neatly by the door, folded her clothes twice before placing them in drawers she still didn't believe were hers. When she laughed at a cartoon playing softly on the television, she covered her mouth immediately and whispered, sorry. Each apology chipped away at something inside Grayson. That afternoon, a social worker called to schedule a visit. Paperwork, evaluations, neutral voices using careful words, temporary. That night, Lila placed her backpack beside the bed again, zipped tight, ready. Grayson noticed but didn't comment. He understood enough now to know that forcing reassurance only made fear dig in deeper. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and said, I'll be in the next room if you need me. She nodded, but long after the lights went out, Grayson lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing how quietly a child could learn to disappear, and how loud the silence became once you noticed it. The social workers arrived 2 days later. Polite smiles, neutral tones. Clipboards held like shields. Marisol Penn led the visit, calm, observant eyes missing nothing. She spoke to Grayson first, then turned her attention to Lila, lowering herself slightly so she wouldn't loom. How are you feeling today? Marisol asked. Lila glanced at Grayson before answering. Okay, she said. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Throughout the conversation, Lila stayed close, her shoulder brushing Grayson's arm whenever unfamiliar words appeared. Foster, placement, review, temporary. After the visit, Marisol pulled Grayson aside. She's adjusting, she said, but she's very guarded, I know, Grayson replied. That evening, they ate dinner quietly. Halfway through, Lila stopped mid-bite, staring at her plate. Are you sure you won't send me somewhere else? She asked. Grayson set his fork down slowly. Why would you think that? She traced a small circle on the table with her finger. Everyone says this part is temporary, she said. They say it like it's kind. Grayson leaned back, choosing his words carefully. Some things take time, he said. That doesn't mean they disappear. She nodded, though doubt still flickered in her eyes. Later that night, a soft knock came at his door. Lila stood there in her wrinkled pink dress, eyes wide, breath uneven. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to wake you. Grayson knelt immediately. You don't have to apologize. She stepped forward, then pressing her forehead lightly against his shoulder. Her body shook as the fear finally slipped free. You can stay, he said quietly. Whenever you need to. She slept on the couch that night, curled beneath a blanket, reassured by the sound of him moving around nearby. And for the first time since she arrived, the backpack stayed in the closet. Weeks passed, slowly, carefully. Small changes appeared. Lila left her drawings on the coffee table instead of hiding them away. She asked questions about school, about the city, about whether mornings would always smell like coffee here. One afternoon she laughed short and surprised, then froze, waiting for correction that never came. Grayson said nothing. He just smiled. The first real crack came when Lila asked very quietly, Can I call you Grayson? Yes, he answered. She hesitated. What if I call you something else later, then we'll talk about it when the time comes? That seemed to satisfy her. Life had begun to settle. Then the knock came. It was early afternoon. Grayson was answering emails in the kitchen, while Lila sat on the floor nearby, carefully building a city out of wooden blocks. The sound echoed through the apartment, sharp, out of place. Lila froze. Her body tensed instantly, eyes wide, breath shallow. Grayson noticed it at once. I'll get it, he said calmly. She didn't move. Her fingers tightened around one of the blocks until it dug into her skin. When Grayson opened the door, the man standing there felt like a shadow dragged in from the past. Unshaven, clothes worn, eyes sharp and searching. I'm here about my daughter, the man said. Lila. Grayson's chest tightened. Behind him, Lila stood silently, gripping the fabric of his sleeve, her face pale. I'm her father, the man added, straightening slightly, as if the word alone should grant him entry. Grayson stepped forward, blocking the doorway. You signed away custody, he said evenly. The man scoffed. Things change. I need her now. Lila's grip tightened, and in that moment, Grayson felt something shift inside him, solid, irreversible. This was no longer about shelter. This was about staying. Grayson did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. The hallway between him and the man felt suddenly narrow, charged, as if the apartment itself had drawn a boundary and was waiting to see who would cross it. You signed away custody, Grayson said again evenly. That was your choice. The man's eyes flicked past him, searching the space behind. The furniture, the light, the quiet order of a life that looked stable, valuable. I'm not here to fight, Cold Heart muttered. She's my responsibility. Grayson tilted his head slightly. Need her for what? The silence answered before the man did. Behind Grayson, Lila stood frozen, her small fingers still gripping his sleeve. Her breathing had become shallow, careful, each breath measured, as if she were afraid to let too much air escape. She's not an object, Grayson said quietly. You don't pick her up when it's convenient. Colt's jaw tightened. You're not her family. The words were meant to end the conversation. Instead, they changed it. Grayson felt the shift before he heard himself speak. Something locked into place inside him, firm and undeniable. I am, he said. The word landed heavier than anything else spoken that day. Lila looked up sharply. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. She pressed closer, her forehead resting briefly against Grayson's arm, as if grounding herself in the truth of what she'd just heard. Colt scoffed. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me now," Grayson replied. "And it concerns the court." That did it. Colt stepped back, muttering under his breath, "You'll hear from my lawyer." The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Lila's knees buckled. Grayson turned, instantly catching her before she hit the floor. She didn't cry. She just shook, small and violent, like her body had been holding the fear too tightly, and finally let it spill. "You're okay," Grayson murmured. "I've got you." She clutched his shirt, face pressed against his chest. "Am I going to have to go with him?" she whispered. Grayson didn't hesitate. "No," he said. "Not if I can stop it." She nodded once, trusting the certainty in his voice more than the words themselves. That night, Lila slept in the guest room with the door open, and Grayson sat awake in the living room long after midnight, staring at the darkened doorway, fully aware that the line drawn that afternoon could never be erased. The days that followed blurred into meetings and paperwork, lawyers, social workers, phone calls that never felt short enough. Elena Cross entered the picture with sharp eyes and a voice that cut through hesitation. She laid out the facts cleanly, without drama. "He signed away custody," she said. "That matters. But he's contesting now, claiming changed circumstances." "What does that mean for Lila?" Grayson asked. "It means uncertainty," Elena replied honestly. Uncertainty lived in Lila's bones. She grew quieter again, watching every interaction with careful focus. She asked fewer questions, moved slower. Each time the doorbell rang, her body stiffened. One evening, she sat beside Grayson on the couch, legs tucked beneath her. "If I go with him," she said softly, "will you forget me?" The question felt like a blade. "No," Grayson said immediately. "That won't happen. But people say things," she continued, "and then they stop." Grayson turned toward her fully. "I'm not people," he said. "I'm here." She studied his face, searching for cracks. None appeared. Still, fear lingered. The night before the hearing, Lila woke from a nightmare she couldn't explain. She didn't knock this time. She just stood in the hallway, small and shaking. Grayson found her there and knelt. "You can stay," he said, opening his arms. She stepped into them without hesitation. "I don't want to wait again," she whispered. Grayson held her, feeling the full weight of what waiting had cost her. The next morning, the courthouse felt cold and impersonal. Lila sat in the hallway with Marisol, feet dangling, eyes fixed on the floor tiles. She counted the lines again, just like she'd learned to do when things felt out of control. Inside the room, words were exchanged. Documents passed. Voices stayed professional, restrained. But every sentence carried a child's future inside it. When Grayson finally stepped back into the hallway, Lila looked up instantly. Her eyes searched his face. He knelt in front of her. "You're not going anywhere," he said. Her breath left her in a shaky rush. She didn't cry. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on like the ground had finally stopped moving. Morning sunlight filled the apartment differently now. Not sharp, not cautious. Steady. Lila woke slowly, without panic, without the instinct to listen for footsteps that meant it was time to move again. She lay still for a moment, testing the quiet. It stayed. She walked down the hallway without checking whether her backpack was still where she'd left it. In the kitchen, Grayson stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair uncombed, coffee already poured. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, and stopped. She had said it without thinking. They ate breakfast together, talking about small things, school, a movie they might watch later, whether it would rain. Lila talked more than she used to. Her sentences no longer stopped halfway, waiting for permission. Later, they walked through the city hand in hand. At a park, children played loudly. freely. Lila watched them for a moment, then ran toward the swings without looking back. She knew he was following. When she swung high, her laughter cut through the airlight and unguarded. That evening, she sat at the table drawing. She pushed the paper toward Grayson. A car under streetlights. 2 figures inside. One small, one big. This was the night, she said. But I fixed it. Grayson shook his head gently. You didn't need fixing. She smiled. No, I needed staying. Later, as he tucked her into bed, she looked up at him, eyes calm. Can I stop waiting now? She asked. Yes, Grayson said without hesitation. You don't have to wait anymore. She closed her eyes almost immediately. Grayson stood in the doorway watching her breathe, understanding that this wasn't the life he'd planned. It was the one that had chosen him. And for the first time, neither of them was afraid of morning. Safety did not erase fear. It only gave it space to speak. The days after the court decision were quieter than Grayson expected. No calls from lawyers, no urgent emails, no strangers knocking at the door. The crisis had passed, but something else lingered, something heavier, slower. Lila changed in small, almost invisible ways. She stopped asking where they were going, stopped checking the time, stopped packing her backpack just in case. Instead, she watched. She watched Grayson's face when he read, his hands when he poured coffee, the way he paused before answering the phone, as if she were collecting evidence. One evening while they were eating dinner, Lila suddenly pushed her plate away. She wasn't upset. She wasn't refusing. She was thinking. Do you ever get tired of me? She asked. Grayson froze. Why would I? He replied carefully. She stared at the table. Because I don't go away, she said. And people get tired of things that don't go away. The words settled between them like a truth she had learned too young. Grayson set his fork down. I get tired sometimes, he said honestly. But not of you. She considered that. Then what do you get tired of? Being careful, he said. Being alone. Lila looked up at him, eyes searching. Does that mean you'll stop staying? She asked. No, Grayson said. It means I'll stay even when it's hard. That night, Lila dreamed again. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply woke up and sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall as if listening to something only she could hear. Grayson found her there when he went to check on her. I thought I heard him, she whispered. Who, my dad? Grayson sat beside her. He can't come here, he said gently. This is your home now. She nodded, but her hands twisted in the blanket. What if I stop being good? She asked. What if I make you mad? Grayson felt the full weight of the question. You don't have to earn staying, he said firmly. You don't lose it by being human. She leaned into his side, then carefully, like she was testing whether gravity still worked, and for the first time she fell back asleep without asking permission. Grayson stayed there long after realizing something important. Saving a child wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small choices made after the danger was gone. The real test came quietly. No courtrooms, no confrontations, just time. Weeks passed, then months. Lila started school. The first morning she stood at the door with her backpack on, waiting, not moving, just waiting, for what Grayson asked. For you to say goodbye, she replied. He knelt in front of her. I'll say it every day, he said, and I'll be here every afternoon too. She studied him, then nodded. At school she spoke softly at first. She raised her hand only when she was sure. She apologized when she didn't need to. But she came home every day, and every day Grayson was there. The consistency did something to her. It rewired her. One afternoon, she came home angry, really angry for the first time. A classmate had taken her crayons and broken them. She threw her backpack onto the couch and crossed her arms. I didn't like it, she said. Grayson waited. And I yelled, she added, bracing herself. And he asked, and Nothing happened, she said, confused. No one left. Grayson smiled. That's usually how it works. That night, she laughed loudly at a movie and didn't apologize. Later, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights come on, Lila leaned her head against his arm without thinking. Do you know what morning feels like now? She asked. Grayson shook his head. It doesn't feel like something I have to survive, she said. It just feels like the next thing. The words stayed with him. On a quiet Sunday, Lila brought him a drawing. Not the night this time, not the car. It was a calendar. Every square filled in with small pictures, coffee cups, books, the park, a sun. What's this? Grayson asked. Our days, she said. I wanted to see how many there were. How many did you count? She shrugged. I stopped counting. That night, as he tucked her in, she asked softly, You don't have a timer, right? Grayson shook his head. No timer. She smiled, turned onto her side, and fell asleep quickly. Grayson stood in the doorway longer than usual, because he understood now. The most powerful thing he had given her wasn't safety or comfort or even love. It was time. Time without an ending. Time that didn't ask her to wait. The morning arrived without ceremony. No alarms, no fear, no calculations about who might leave first. Light slid through the windows and rested on the floor like it had always belonged there. Lila woke slowly, not because something pulled her out of sleep, but because her body had learned it was allowed to wake up gently. She lay still for a moment, listening. The city breathed. Pipes clicked softly. Somewhere in the kitchen, a coffee machine hummed. Ordinary sounds, safe sounds. She didn't reach for her backpack. She didn't check the door. She got out of bed and walked down the hallway barefoot. Her steps unhurried, her shoulders loose in a way they had never been before. Grayson stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy, reading something on his phone that clearly wasn't urgent. When he noticed her reflection in the glass, he turned and smiled. Morning, he said. Morning, she replied. The word felt different now. Lighter. It no longer meant you survived. It simply meant you're here. They ate breakfast together. No rush. No rules spoken aloud. Lila poured her own juice and spilled a little, then froze, eyes flicking up, waiting for the moment to turn sharp. Grayson handed her a towel. That happens, he said. She wiped it up, nodding, still watching his face. Nothing changed. After breakfast, they walked through the city. Lila didn't hold his hand the whole time anymore, only when crossing streets, only when she felt like it. She stopped to look at things now. A dog tied outside a cafe, a mural half hidden behind scaffolding, a street musician tuning his guitar. At the park, she ran ahead. Not far, just enough. She climbed the steps to the slide and sat at the top, legs dangling, hair catching the light. For a moment, she looked back, not to check if he was there, but to share the view. Watch this, she called. She slid down, laughing, the sound full and unguarded. Children joined her. Voices overlapped. The world widened. Grayson sat on the bench and watched her disappear into the noise, feeling something inside him, loosen something he hadn't known he'd been holding since the night in the parking lot. Later, back home, Lila pulled out her crayons. She sat at the table and drew carefully, pressing too hard at first, then easing up. When she finished, she slid the paper across to him. It was the car again. Streetlights overhead. 2 figures inside. But this time there was a line drawn through the night sky, soft yellow like morning breaking through. I changed it, she said. The ending. Grayson studied the picture. What happens now? She thought for a moment. They keep driving, she said, but not because they have to. That evening the knock came. It was gentle, expected. Marisol stood in the doorway with a folder tucked under her arm, her smile warm but professional. The final paperwork. The last signatures. Words that turned temporary into something steady. Leela sat quietly on the couch watching the adults talk, reading the room the way she always had. When Marisol finished, she knelt in front of Lila. "You've been very brave," she said. "Do you have any questions?" Lila hesitated. Then she asked the one she had been carrying the longest. "Do I still have to wait?" Marisol glanced at Grayson, then back at Lila. "Wait for what?" Lila swallowed. "For people to decide if I can stay." The room went very quiet. Grayson stepped forward. He knelt too, so they were level. "You don't have to wait anymore," he said. "Not here." Lila looked at him. Really looked, searching for the place where promises usually broke. She didn't find it. That night, Grayson tucked her in. She didn't ask him to stay. She didn't ask him to leave the door open. She just pulled the blanket up, rolled onto her side, and sighed a small content sound that came from somewhere deep. As he turned off the light, she spoke. "Grayson, yes, can I stop waiting now?" The question was quiet, calm, nothing like the night she had asked the dark to keep her alive until morning. "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "You can." She smiled, eyes already closing. "Okay," she whispered. Sleep took her easily. Grayson stood in the doorway longer than usual, watching her chest rise and fall, understanding something with absolute clarity. Waiting had been her job for too long. Waiting for warmth, waiting for safety, waiting for someone to come back. Now her only job was living. He turned off the hall light and walked back to the living room, the apartment no longer feeling too big, too quiet, too empty. It felt exactly the right size. Outside, the city moved on cars, passing lights, changing people, hurrying toward lives full of reasons and regrets. Inside, a little girl slept without fear. And a man who had once believed his life was defined by what he controlled, now understood it was defined by what he chose to stay for. A child who once believed she might not see morning had found someone who would make sure she always did. And for the first time, neither of them was waiting for anything at all. Did this story move you? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss other heartwarming stories. Click on the last screen to see the next emotional chapter waiting for you. See you in the next story.